So if you're thinking of heading to Indo and you're worried that it's not quite the right season, the winds might be bad, and whether you're making the right call or not to go in the off season, let me explain what you can realistically expect from a trip at this time of year. Generally speaking, the wet season runs from around October until April. I mean, it changes depending on the year. Sometimes rain comes late, sometimes it comes early. You might consider December, January, February to be the main wet season. That's generally when they get the most rain in Indonesia, while sort of October, November, March, April, they're kind of like the shoulder seasons between the two. So those months can often be pretty good time. For example, if it's October, November, the rainy season might start late, so you've got a bit of an extended like dry season. You know, if the dry season starts early for whatever reason, you might get really good conditions in March, April. It really does just depend. Heading to Indo during the wet season, is it going to be like 4 to 6 foot freight train deserts or like classic HTs? Probably not. I mean, it can be. They do have some solid off-season swells. You've just got to obviously keep your eye on the chart, but for the most part, it's not like that. And to be totally honest, how many of us actually want that? You know, when you get an Indian Ocean swell of like 8 feet, 15, 16, 17 seconds, these are substantial swells, and when they meet a reef break in Indo, how many of us are actually up to surfing those kind of waves, you know? Like how many of us are getting drained over like shallow reef on one of those kind of swells? Do the vast majority of us just want like 3 foot head high beaches or fun little reef passes to surf, you know? Well, the good thing is in the wet season, that is what you can expect more realistically. You know, you might have the odd bigger day. When I was on my last trip with Renegade back in January, we had like 7 foot at 16 seconds, something like that. So while big swells can happen, they're not to the same frequency and generally not to the same intensity as what you'll find in dry season. You know, if you get those big swells in June, July, August, come with a lot of power, a lot of period, you know, that's serious waves. Whereas January, February, that sort of time, you know, a lot of the time it is just kind of like head high. People always ask me, they're like, Dan, I'm going to Indo, I'm going in January, February for a month. I'm worried about the wind, like, is it just gonna be shit the whole time? Like, what kind of waves I'm gonna get and where should I go? To be honest, I've been to Indonesia more in the wet season than I have in the dry season. And I've always found that for the majority of the time, wherever you are, in the morning will still be fairly clean and you'll get a good few hours of like clean, glassy conditions. When it starts to heat up, you get that onshore breeze come in sort of mid-morning, 10, 11 a.m. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's a bit later, just depends on the weather systems. But that's the thing with the wet season. So generally it does follow that pattern. That's what I would head there expecting on a day-to-day basis. But because you are in wet season, there is a lot of rain. Like sometimes you get up to go for your Dorney and there'll just be a storm. It'll just be all dark and like moody and the wind will come in for a little bit and that can often wreck the conditions for the morning. It just depends on the weather front, you know. Sometimes you have those days where it's rainy and windy and a bit weird, but there's generally somewhere to surf. But when it's stormy like that, there's always the potential for it to glass off and clean up again, you know, wind switching, these rain squalls come over and it kills all the wind, glasses off again. So if you're there in wet season, I just generally expect to do most of your surfing in the morning and then in the afternoon, you know, just go out for your onshore grovel, or you might get lucky and it might glass off again, you know, with the rain. What you won't have in the wet season, like basically all over Indo, is those traditional like trade winds where it's going to blow in the same direction all day. You know, if you're at somewhere like Ulus in June, July, you know it's basically going to be that wind direction for basically all day. So you're generally not going to have that. It's more realistic that you're going to have offshore mornings, onshore afternoons, not those classic like trade winds. Thanks to Renegade for sponsoring this video. Now, Renegade run world-class coaching trips to some of the most progression-friendly spots around, including South Sumatra in the heart of the off-season. So if you want to get better at surfing in a wicked setting, I'll leave the link down in the description where you can check Renegade out. Their spots usually fill up pretty quick, so be fast. For now, let's get back to the video. So crowds wise, so although it's technically the off season, like if you're in any of like the main surf zones, obviously like Bali, anywhere that's like known as a surf destination, there's gonna still be plenty of people surfing. You know, it's not like nobody goes there in the wet season. You know, for much of the northern hemisphere, it's winter for most of us, so a lot of people traveling to Indo during this time. All these places are going to be pretty packed almost no matter what the conditions are like and what time of year you're going there. It's just kind of how it is. But crowds wise, what you probably don't have is those like classic days where it's pumping all day, offshore all day, and you've got like a crowd of 200 plus people out, you know, battling for waves. You know, you see those crazy clips of like Padang and Ulus where there's like 200 people out and it's just firing, but like the craziest scene you've ever seen in your life. I mean, it's generally not like that. It's still really crowded, but not insane. But generally speaking, like going to Indo in the off season will be a bit less crowded than it will be in peak season. But don't take that and go, oh, I'm gonna go to Indo and it's gonna be uncrowded, because it will still be crowded. So in terms of destinations, there can still be really good waves all over Indo in the wet season. Obviously Bali is still a good option because Bali's quite unique. It's got two coastlines, obviously it's shaped like that. So you've got sort of wet season waves and dry season waves. Now what a lot of people say, and what is quite often like a misconception I've found, is that, you know, in the wet season, the west coast will always just be onshore, but it's not the case. Like still in the morning, you'll have offshore periods for a few hours. It'll still be glassy in the morning, then you'll get the onshores. On the west coast, because of that onshore flow, you quite often get cleaner conditions all day. Not always, it can still come up onshore in the afternoon as well. Generally, like places like Karamus and Sanur, they're considered like wet season waves because they can work quite well in the wet season, but you know, they have their good days in the dry season as well. So yeah, west coast, like Ulus, Canggu, it will be onshore for quite a lot of the afternoon, but in the morning you'll have a good chance to surf unless there's a bit of a storm or wind squall that's come through, and then potentially another go in the evening as well. I mean, the first time I ever surfed Ulus was like late evening in like December, and it was like 3 to 4 foot, super clean and like glassy. It was sick. So Sumbawa is another pretty good option during this time. Like January, February is pretty good period for lakeys. Gets really fun waves during this time. Again, it's still going to be crowded because, like I said, it's a popular destination for people from Europe at this time of year, so it's not empty, and it's still really consistent but doesn't have as frequent as powerful swells, you know, like it's not going to be like heaving pits every single day, and there'll still be the odd day where it's hollow and heavy, but like not as much. It's often a little bit more playful, a bit more user friendly. I've only been there in like Jan, Feb sort of time, so I only know from experience at that time of year. I've heard in sort of July, August, it's quite often like 4 to 6 foot every single day, with quite frequent bigger days as well. Lombok as well is another good zone to go to kind of at any time of year. Gets pretty fun waves in the wet season. Again, kind of like Bali, it's got like a coastline that means that under trade winds you've got places that are always offshore, and even when it's onshore, like there's places that can be offshore as well. So it really does just depend on what's going on. Mentawai as well, I mean, definitely gets its fair share of fun waves in the off season. You know, the resorts always post like clips from like, oh, this day was really fun, and it's like January. Yeah, I mean, they definitely get their fair share of waves. I'd say with the Ments, probably a bit less reliable. I quite like in wet season to have the option to have like beaches, so when it is small you can still surf. So then when the swell is small, you've got these like little magnets to go to. I've only been to the Ments once, and that was in March, so it's kind of shoulder season, and yeah, for the most part it was kind of just like head high, head and a half, like fun waves. And then there was just 1 or 2 days, I think towards the end of the trip, so it probably was more into April, where it was a lot more solid and it was like 4 to 6 foot tubes. And yeah, it was packed that day. There was like 50, 60 people out. And then South Sumatra is another really good option at this time of year. It's kind of like beachy season, so like Mandiri can be really fun at this time. It's not necessarily going to always be tubing. It's when I was there on my last trip with Renegade, it was just fun for turns most of the time. I mean, it was quite small even for there, but yeah, that can be just a really fun place to get fun waves. It's a good option as well because the beach is like miles and miles long. It can spread out the crowd a bit, even though because all of the accommodations are clustered around like Mandiri Beach Club, and in that one zone everyone does kind of just surf out front, so it can actually get crowded. But there's peaks like all the way up and down the beach. If you just walk down, you could surf by yourself quite a lot of the time, although I never did that the entire trip. So weather-wise, it can be a bit temperamental. You know, like I said before, you get these storms that come through, which can happen in the morning and it can mess up the conditions. So it's not like always that clockwork offshore morning, onshore afternoons. So yeah, if you're heading to Indo in the wet season, I'd expect to just get really, really fun, relatively easy to surf waves, you know, especially at the beaches of Bali, Sumatra, you're gonna get really fun, punchy beach break waves. On the bigger days, obviously no matter where you are, you're in Indo, so there's always reefs that you can surf. So while it might not be this like all-time, like quintessential Indonesian lineup every single day, you'll have really fun waves. It's going to be really surfable and quite likely much better than what you surf at home on a day-to-day basis. So if you go there at this time with more of the attitude of like, okay, might not be all time, but I'm just going to go, it's going to be really fun waves, might get the odd day, it's going to be really fun waves for turns most of the time, and then if we're lucky we might get the day where it's barreling and, you know, we might get some proper Indo conditions. So any questions about visiting Indo in the off season, please comment down below. If you want a bit more information on where to go based on your ability, I'd love to help you make it happen via a one-to-one call, so you can check the schedule up there and down in the description. And yeah, thanks once again to Renegade for bringing me on the trip earlier this year. They've got a couple of different trips now happening in January next year, so if you want to jump on board one of them and get really fun waves at Mandiri Beach Club, then I'll leave the link in the description where you can check availability out as well. So hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.